All right, so I just got out of the movie theaters, watched Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Some thoughts on it. Well, first off, it doesn't waste any time getting to kind of the main storyline, which at this point is a good sign. I think we really get to this scene right here in the trailer. We get to this pretty quickly, and we get to the main plot right away, almost within the first like 10 minutes, I'd say. Man, it wasn't great. I'm not gonna lie. This movie, I would say it solely exists to set up Kang, which is fine in a way. Jonathan Majors is certainly hamming it up in this movie. He's taking this role very seriously. He's playing this villain very straightforward, like over the top serious, not over the top like a Jesse Eisenberg in Batman v Superman, but a very serious performance. And that's all well and good. It just doesn't necessarily work sometimes. The thing about the Ant-Man movies that came before this were that they felt different than the rest of the MCU. Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp felt very, not necessarily disconnected, but they just had a totally different style. It was a little more lighthearted, better comedy than kind of what the MCU had offered in that era. And now we go through to the third Ant-Man where its only purpose is, it's really serious, this movie, I think, throughout. They definitely try some jokes, as they always do, and more often than not, I don't think they land very well. And now we're at the point where I feel like this is a wasted movie for what's been two good movies before. I really like both Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp, but now this thing exists, I think, just for Jonathan Majors to set up the next villain, which I don't really think that is fair to these two movies. Some positives about it. I don't know if it actually looks amazing, but there's a lot of interesting designs in this movie. It's heavily influenced by Star Wars, and when Star Wars, A New Hope, when Star Wars is your influence, it's a good start. There's a lot of interesting character designs and a lot of stuff going on. The problem is it's a little CGI heavy, big surprise at this point, and it doesn't look particularly interesting or tactile, which is an ongoing issue with these movies. But it at least holds your attention enough, I'd say, where the Star Wars references and homages are almost too in your face to the point where you have to pay attention. You're like, oh, Peyton Reed is clearly referencing Star Wars here. I will keep my eye on it because I know Star Wars and I like Star Wars. Therefore, this is good enough, right? Yes and no. I'm very overall mixed on this movie. In terms of the performances, no one really stood out. The actress who plays Scott's daughter, I forget her name at the moment, but she was okay. I thought her plot line was okay. She kind of has a little bit of an arc throughout. Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas are probably like asleep filming this. I don't think what they're doing is particularly interesting or even like remotely resembles effort. I kind of think they're just going through the motions because they're probably just standing in an empty room with a bunch of blue and green screens. Paul Rudd's having fun. They introduced MODOK, which I thought was an interesting twist to how they handle MODOK. That's a character I really like, and to see him in this kind of format that they chose, I won't spoil, but they choose something interesting with him, and I'm kind of okay with it. I think I'm okay with it. I'm curious if we see him pop up anywhere else in something, but it was an interesting choice. And I'll just leave it there. No spoilers. No spoilers. I'm not spoiling. Overall, I think that this movie doesn't necessarily work because of the scale of it. This is technically the smallest Marvel movie because it takes place in the quantum realm, but this is easily the biggest meaningful movie, I guess, meaningful to the MCU and to the entire, the scale of the battles that we see here, especially in the third act, are definitely Endgame-esque in terms of the size, which to me at this point, 30 whatever movies in, 30, 31 movies in, your brain kind of shuts off because you don't really know what's happening. You don't know these characters. Endgame works because you've known these characters for a decade. This one doesn't work because I've known like 3 of the millions of background characters being generated. I've known them for 2 hours. So it definitely shuts your brain off, and it goes on for a while. The battle scenes, the fight scenes, they try to keep them interesting with some fresh visuals and new ways that they fight, but it does go on a while. And I kind of think the most interesting parts of this movie are when Kang, Jonathan Majors, and insert someone else here are talking to each other kind of one-on-one and are just going through their purpose, a backstory maybe. It isn't necessarily the cleanest at times, but I think it's interesting because what made Thanos so interesting was when we found out more about him in his dialogue scenes. And I think they are trying to go for that same energy here. I'm just not entirely sure that it works. And this is only, we're one movie, one Loki season with Jonathan Majors. So there's definitely more to be had here. And I don't necessarily know where we go from here with it. This is going to tie heavily into Loki season 2. That's pretty obvious. That's definitely not a spoiler. It's quite clear what they're trying to do, I think. And we're going to see how it goes from here. I didn't love this movie. I give it a 2.5 out of 5, I think. It's definitely not my favorite Marvel movie. But hey, they all can't be, I guess. Overall, I didn't hate it. Marvel clearly seems to have this formula that makes, at least in my opinion, and to the average person's opinion, somewhat interesting, at least, where you're going to be, even if you're disengaged, you can kind of still follow what's going on, just because it's Marvel. But, other than that, I don't think this was a success, especially given what came before in this trilogy of Ant-Man movies, where it was just, the tone was just totally different throughout. I think that's my biggest issue with this movie, is that if this is the 3rd movie in the Ant-Man trilogy, which it technically is, but it's also the 31st or 30th movie in the MCU, and therefore it has to serve those other 29 movies before it serves the 2 Ant-Man movies that came before. So ultimately, yeah, not great. Certainly not a failure. I think this is going to make a ton of money at the box office, I'm sure. First Marvel movie in some time. And it's the start of the Kang dynasty. Is that what they're calling it? The Kang movies, whatever. So we'll see how it does. I would imagine most people are going to be pretty on it. Probably a lot of 2-3 reviews, 2-3-star reviews, I'd say. But yeah. Other than that, thank you everyone for watching. 2.5 out of 5, and I'll catch you in the next video.